we're going to talk really about the future. The University of Florida has been on our AI journey for the past 6 years, and so we feel like we have put in place a number of the fundamentals in terms of curriculum and building the IT infrastructure and integrating it with the research program of the university. We feel like we've sort of done the fundamentals, but we're a little bit worried. Worried may be the wrong word, but we're a little bit concerned about the future. As we observed during the last session, AI is moving at an incredibly rapid pace. We know that agents are coming along with a certain amount of fury. OpenClaw, probably everyone has heard of, with its capabilities and its problems. And we worry about the next generation of students and faculty who are going to show up at the University of Florida with very different expectations from the current faculty, right? I mean, as we observed in the last session, the freshman class that comes in the fall is going to be the first set of students who've gone through high school with ChatGPT at their fingertips. Faculty are going to come increasingly expecting to have a semi-sophisticated AI environment. So we're trying to think about what the environment should be 3, 5, 7 years from now. And that's a tricky business because with the technology moving so rapidly, no one knows exactly where it's going or what it's going to be able to do. So we'd like to spend this hour talking a little bit about it. And I have an expert on my right and an expert on my left who will talk about the different domains. Oh, okay. Well, we pay you to be an expert, so I'm hoping we're not wasting our money. So the expert on my right is the CIO, the Chief Information Officer and Senior Vice President of the University of Florida, Elias Eldayrie. The expert on my left is Alina Zare, who is Director of the, I never get this right,
Artificial Intelligence and Informatics Research Institute.
Artificial Intelligence and Informatics Research Institute. Everyone in this room is aware of the AI Squared Center because they sponsored this conference. And the AI Squared Center was really designed to be on the teaching, learning side of AI. And at the same time we built that, the Vice President for Research built Alina's Center, which is really to address AI in the research sphere. And so she will talk about that. So in this session, we would like to talk about the directions that we're heading for the future. And I want to start out by giving just a little bit of background before I turn it over to Elias and Alina. And so what we did about a year ago, as we began to face this problem of what does the future look like, we convened a task force, which we called the AI Blue Sky Task Force, and brought together a group of faculty, students, and staff to talk about what the AI environment should look like at the University of Florida 5 years from now. Now, 5 years is a long time, okay? And so they had a really fun task and a difficult task at the same time. The fun part of the task was let your imaginations go and dream about what you would like the AI environment to be on the campus. The difficult task is we don't know where the technology is going, right? So we can't design that or plan that with complete precision. So they spent about 6 months talking about what that should look like and ultimately issued a report which forms a good part of our work plan moving forward into the future. And I think at least the expert on my right will talk about that a little bit because he was a member of that task force and so is largely responsible for whether or not that gets done right or not. No pressure. Okay. But in the meantime, so I would like to give each of these experts the opportunity to talk a little bit about what does the future look like in the relatively near term in their particular domains. And so having said that, let me turn to Alina and ask her to talk about the research sphere.
Sure. Good morning. Great to be here. So thank you for this opportunity to talk about the future in the next few years and then longer out in terms of AI in research at a research university. I think there's a couple big challenges and also a lot of opportunities. So some of the, I'll lay a little bit of groundwork. So as Joe mentioned, we've had several years of building up the AI initiative at the University of Florida with a lot of success and excitement. I think faculty across campus are really excited about it. And with all the new tools that have come out in AI, there's a lot of engagement and adoption and saying, how can I incorporate this into my research program? At the same time, there's a lot of challenges is that, you know, as the director of the Research Institute, one of my roles is to help connect faculty across disciplines and across campus. The number of requests I get, can I have a collaborator in computer science? Can I have a collaborator that is developing X, Y, and Z in AI is enormous, right? And I think that presents some opportunity to say we need to shift those questions from we have to collaborate only with a small discipline to we have to figure out how we adopt these tools into our own disciplines and use them in our research exercise. So that's one of the challenges and opportunities. I think another, when we think about, you know, the massive advances that have happened in AI recently, a lot of that has been driven by massive amounts of data. So data is our fuel for AI. And, you know, there's been some concern, what happens when we run out of all the data that's been posted on the internet for our large language models and AI systems to learn from? How do we continue to develop these tools? Some of that has driven this work in agentic AI, and I can talk about that further. But I think that also presents an opportunity at research universities to say we are the data generators, particularly when it comes to our areas of expertise. And so everything these systems have learned about, you know, economics, ecology, whatever area we're doing research in, they've learned from universities carrying out the studies and putting this research on the open internet, right? And so that's a huge opportunity for us to think about what carrying out the research of what data do we need to collect to drive these forward, right? And I think this is a in some sense, a huge power initiative. We've got a lot of control here to think about where do we want to drive our fields in AI. Another big aspect in this is incorporating AI into our research activities is really changing. You know, I've been in conversations with Joe previously, and he made a great comment. Is we've been through this before when the internet came out or when email was introduced. You know, we've had drastic changes into how we carry out our day-to-day research, and just like was discussed in the talk downstairs, probably the long-term future for this is we're not going to say I'm going to do this with AI. It's just how we do things, right? And so, how is that changing our research in all of our disciplines? So, you know, by carrying out the research to figure out how do we develop the AI to advance our disciplines, that's also advancing AI. And so, we like to hear a lot, we do AI for science, and that leads to the science of AI. And so when we think about the AI for science component of it, that again is just like we are the ones that generate data to drive AI, we're the ones with the expertise to understand what do we need our AI systems to do to advance our state of knowledge in our respective fields. Some examples keep on coming up. So I'll tell you, faculty at UF repeatedly reach out and say, you know, we have in our field, I'm going to pick economics because this was a conversation I had recently. We've got models that operate at different scales. We have microeconomics and macroeconomics. And I've talked to folks in ecology, and they say we have models of how an individual plant functions, and we have models of a field and at the remote sensing scale. But in many fields, over and over again, we don't have models that cross these scales, right? And this is an opportunity for AI. We can start asking, what data do we need to collect to connect these? And can we run our AI models to start learning these connections? And so by doing this, we can start thinking about our disciplines in a new way, saying what big open questions have we not been able to tackle that we can use AI as a tool to help us crack this really difficult challenge. And then also by opening those up, that leads us to saying, what advancements in AI do we really need to make, right? And so I think that leads to an enormous opportunity. And so in some senses, it's a lot of challenges, but we at universities are really in a position to take advantage of these. So we are the data generators. We're the ones with the expertise to drive AI in our field, which in turn drives how AI advances as a whole. And there's also a lot of discussion, this morning and recently about agentic AI. And so my understanding of agentic AI is it's taking from an AI system that you just have discussion with to an AI system that can take action. It has agency. It can run a function. It can send you a reminder in the morning to make sure your kid's wearing the costume for the day or whatever, which is what I always forget. And so doing this is also leading to our operations in research or our day-to-day actions that we do in research. How can we shift a lot of the kind of burden, the portions that we're spending, the administrative burden or the time, the very detailed, I'll give an example. My personal research has been in computer vision. And I've hired undergrad students to trace out plant roots for hours in a day. It's incredibly tedious. I can now turn that over to an AI system and it gets it done really quickly, right? And so how can we shift from all this really tedious work to opening ourselves up to thinking about what is the big creative questions we need to be spending our time on? And driving also that agentic research into what really enables us to focus on the visionary work in AI and our respective fields. So I think there's a lot of opportunity.
So before we pass this over to the CIO, let me ask if you could talk a little bit more about how you see agents and possibly robots changing the work in the laboratory.
Oh yes, this is an excellent question. And so there's been a national conversation about this in terms of autonomous laboratories. And a number of federal agencies have put out funding calls for this topic, and so there's a lot of excitement around it. And the idea is, can we have a fully autonomous AI system, right? So can we have a researcher say, I want to learn more about this research problem. You have a large language model that generates a bunch of hypotheses and potential questions and perhaps sorts them for the researcher to say, yes, this is the one we want to go after. It then deploys robots in your wet lab or your laboratory on campus, collects the data needed for that study, runs the analysis, and presents you with the results. This is the long-term vision of this fully autonomous AI lab. I think, and so there's agents built into all of that because they're running tasks. They're saying, I've got to collect this data. I'm going to spawn off an agent that's going to go and run the process in the lab. I'm going to spawn off an agent that's going to control the robotic system that's moving throughout the agricultural field collecting data. And I think, well, certainly this presents a lot of AI development challenges that is really funding this research effort. How do we get this up to speed? But I think it also presents a lot of opportunity for us, again, to think about how can we shift from some of the tedious research work to the big thinking, how do we spend our time guiding these systems to answering the questions that really improve our lives and improve the state of the world. And so that, part of me is, first time I heard this, oh man, I better start spiffing up my resume. I think I'm going to be out of a job soon. But in actuality, these AI systems, what they're excellent at is repeating processes they've seen examples of before. Right? And so maybe they can come up with, here's potential scientific questions. A lot of those, at least the state of how those systems are now, are questions others have asked before that haven't been answered, or are questions that have been asked in related fields that they're shifting over to the field of interest. So there's still the need, of course, for human creativity and guidance of these systems of where do we need to go next. And I think developing these so we can shift our focus to that creativity and teaching our students how to think about more what is the important research question to ask and how do you identify that important research question and formulate it for these systems to do a good job on.
Thank you, Alina. As I turn this over to the CIO to make his comments, let me just tell you that we're going to leave time at the end of this session for questions. So you might think about that, and we'll leave about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for a conversation. So let me turn to the CIO, and I think he'll address infrastructure a little bit. Do you want this, Elias? Would you rather that?
I think this works, right? Can you hear me? Yeah, so I'm Elias Eldayrie. I'm the CIO at the University of Florida, and I've had really the pleasure to watch the university grow through our journey on AI. And as you heard the provost said earlier, been at it for 6 years. That's literally when the donation by Chris Malachowski was made in 2020. But our really experience with it, it's a little earlier than that, although it's been it was not as mature as it's becoming. In 2017, we got our first investment into AI GPUs at that time. And I mentioned that not to talk about the past because we want to talk about the future, but it's a foundational thing that we've done that allowed the university to begin to put their toes in the water and allows us to begin to build an ecosystem around supporting AI and supporting the faculty and be able to really meet the demand that is going a lot faster than anybody anticipated. I was at a meeting the other day, and now the AI cycle is about 90 days. It's not 9 months, it's not 1 year, it's 90 days. So what happens in 90 days will be somewhat different than what will happen now. But the only thing that will stay consistent is really what Chris talked about downstairs, and that is to build an infrastructure on campus as a core infrastructure, not an experiment, not something you try out, but it will be foundational that allows you to stack solution over it and able to predict its approach, standards, security, resiliency. That is really what the enterprise is going to have to worry about, and that's what we are worrying about at the University of Florida. We, as of 2020, we began to look at the infrastructure as core that will be available to everybody. So the Provost vision on the 2020 was really very simple, but yet incredibly powerful statement that has transformed what we do. And that is, if we are in AI, we will teach it across the curriculum. Now, universities around the country trying to do the same thing, because I think there is the right thing. And as we all know, that AI is going to be everything. And yes, hopefully in 5 years from now, we're not talking about AI, but we're talking about the impact of AI. So we are building an environment to do that. As we build these things, we've done good things, we've made mistakes. Sometimes we underbought, sometimes we overbought. It's all because of the unpredictability of where this environment is going. But what we said we want to do is we want to make sure we build a private environment. And I want to emphasize that allows us to give us the flexibility to meet the demands that we cannot anticipate. A lot of traditional computing is really predictable. You know how many transactions you're going to run, you know how many batches you're going to run. All of those things are very predictable for the most part. I've been in technology since 1988. But AI is a little bit different because, a lot different, is because you don't know what you don't know. OpenClaw was not even a conversation last year. In the last 2 weeks, it is the craze that everybody's trying to figure out what that is, what is it going to do for the university, for the organizations and the ecosystem we all work in. As a consequence, just last week, I sat down with my team and said, okay, what are we going to do about OpenClaw, right? How are we going to manage that? We did not have a strategy for it last month. This month, we will have a strategy for it, but because We actually have some of those foundational work that we worked on, and it is something that we intend to do to begin to stay ahead the curve as much as we possibly can. We also, back in 2020 when we got the gift, we got, at the time, was the state-of-the-art GPUs from NVIDIA, DGX A100s. Now we have replaced them because there was 2-3 generations since. And we replaced them with the latest GPUs, the Blackwell 200s, Blackwell 300s, which is the latest GPU technology from NVIDIA. NVIDIA is already planning to release the latest technology, which is Rubin. And that will do things that this one does not do. And the point that I'm trying to tell you can't keep chasing it, but you have to have a foundation that allows you to upgrade, upskill, and reposition yourself to meet the demand of the researchers, to meet the demand of the teaching and learning, and I would add assessment to our communities. So as a consequence, we have now invested in a new slate of GPUs. They are specific to specific work, like digital twins. Allows us to actually remove some of the workload that we've had on the old technology to work on larger complex models. We've got to the place where not everybody needs a Ferrari to go from home to the store, but maybe you need one at the racetrack, right? So the question is, can we figure out what people need? Often we get people call and say, hey, you know what, I have this big project and I need 100 GPUs. And we're like, okay, well, tell us exactly what you're trying to do. Then you figure out they need 1 GPU. And not because they're ignorant, it's because they really don't know the power of this technology. And if you don't know on the other side of it, you'll end up giving them 100 GPUs, tying up a Ferrari that you could do for other things. So it's really important to understand that balance. And Chris talked about it downstairs, the human in the loop is incredibly important. To be able to have that question, Alina, what is it that you want to do? Or Joe, what do you want to do? And then try to have expertise behind the scene to be able to scope the problem. If you are going to be investing in technology on campus, you have to invest with people with it. It doesn't run on its own. And it does not know the right answers on its own. So we've done both of those. So over time, we built the technology and we built the people. Our goal now in the future, the Provost and I were talking earlier about this, 1 to 3 years, we are going to be building, we already started that work, but we're going to really formalize it, is what we're calling an AI factory. And it really works just like an AI, like a factory. It's going to have hardware, it's going to have a building, it's going to have hardware is in the building, it's going to have software layers, it's going to have people to support it, power, all of those things that you would need a factory to actually run. And the reason for that is we want to build a home for agentic AI. You're going to have a lot of digital agents working across the enterprise. In fact, they're already there. People are building them every day. They're on campus, they're in your organization. You may not know about it, but that is an environment that is exploding at a rate that nobody has anticipated. So we talked a little bit about OpenClaw earlier. Well, OpenClaw allows you to build agents, sub-agents, and agents to those agents. You could do them horizontally, you could do them vertically. All of those digital agents will need to live somewhere. Will need to be onboarded, they'll need to be secured, they'll need to be governed, they'll need to be wrapped around with a security layer that allows you to protect what Alina was talking about, the data of the university. LLMs, for the most part, have already been trained on whatever is available on the web. That work is done. It's just now, it's on margins. Whatever new comes up, it gets trained on it. But the heavy lift is done. The next lift is really training your models on your data. I don't know about you, but a lot of people know they have a lot of data, but they don't know where it is, what shape it's in, how much you trust it. And in our view, in the next 3 years, that's going to be a lift for us to make sure we get this data in a place that allows us to inform these models to answer the questions and inform decision-making in a level of accuracy. So right now, LLM models they are being used. I saw a number the other day, 83% of employees around the country are using AI, but only two out of three actually trust the result of these AIs. What's lacking? Well, the data is number one, and number two is the context. A lot of these models don't have context built into them. So you're gonna see now the next evolution in the next 2 to 3 years, tech companies working on what they call I think it's context language models, where they will try to literally build some of what Chris talked about downstairs, that 5,000 years of experience of doctors community built into these models that allows you to have some confidence into what comes back. We're gonna try to see what we could do at the University of Florida to figure out how do we build context into these models. And the industry is working on them. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to pick the right partner. We're lucky enough, and I admit that, we're biased. We work a lot with NVIDIA. We have an incredibly great relationship with them. And our plan is to continue to work with them and see if we could inform our models with context that allows us to build that trust between technology and people. The other thing I will tell you is a lot of people are right now using AI at the individual level. Researchers, student, faculty member, and that is about 82% of the people. But only 5% to 7% of companies around the country are actually using it at scale. And that's what's gonna have to be the next 2 to 3 years. Can you pivot from individual use to scale? And I don't know about you, the last board meeting we had, one of our board members said, okay, we spent a lot of money, what's the ROI? I don't know how you put an ROI about teaching somebody to be functional in the next economy. But that question is gonna be coming more and more because more and more money is being invested in that technology. And the only way you can really make a difference and pivot if you go from individual use to vertical scale use. So, can you inform admission process? Can you inform enrollment management? Can you inform advisement? Can you inform the procurement office? You have to look at those verticals and scale it at the enterprise level, and that's what would pivot it. Because the LLMs are, they're fun until you actually stack something above them that allows you to drive value into the organization. So we are trying to prepare ourselves for that. So we're gonna be building an infrastructure that allows those agents to live nicely with each other, and ability to onboard them and fire them if we need to, ability for people to call these agents for their own models to solve problems that otherwise they can't do it on their own, or it's readily available in that agent that's already been built, and to be actually standardized. So we're also reached out to NIST to make sure whatever security umbrella that we put in, it is something that will be nationally endorsed and supported. And last but not least, we want to build a continue to do white glove service for our researchers. And I say that because you do not get that from the cloud services. In the cloud services, you can have a credit card, you buy compute, you buy storage, and they'll say good luck. That's not what research is, right? And what we found out relatively easy earlier when we got a lot of pushback once you go to the cloud as opposed to building on campus. And the reason for that is because cloud cannot give you the support you need for unpredictable needs. They could give you for predictable needs, but not when it's unpredictable. And that's that white glove service that I think researchers need, and we will continue to invest in it. I think private clouds is going to be much more important in the next 2 to 3 years than private clouds, just because the unpredictability that the AI is presenting. I'll stop here and we'll ask any other questions.
Maybe I could ask you to talk a little bit about a couple of the projects that we think are going to change the environment for undergraduate students, right?
Yeah. So again, one of the things that like everybody else, started as what can we do individually for the individual people on campus? And so we rolled out what we call a gateway for agentic AI. It's called Navigator AI. At UF, everything has got a gator in it. So this is a Navigator AI, which is actually a gateway to more than 70 models that people could access. A lot of them run on Hypergator, our supercomputer. Some of them run natively in their environment. But we also talk about scale. We said, okay, we know students are going to those LLMs trying to tutor themselves. And some of those tutors are good. Some of them, faculty would argue they're helping students cheat. We wanted to make sure that we delivered AI solutions that students could learn from, but not necessarily give them the answer to. So we rolled out last semester. Yeah. Right? I mean, we've been at it for a year. Yeah, in the fall, time, like I said, it's 90 days now, the cycle. So we rolled out an AI tutor for our students that allows them to really get tutored in any subject on campus that we teach on campus, and also in multiple languages that you're able to do. And then recently we integrated voice with it, because somebody I'm not gonna name, the provost, said, geez, nobody wants to text anymore. Can we put voice in there so we could just talk to it? And yes, we did that. We had to do it.
Over the great objection of the CIO.
That is correct, because that was a lot of work. And that was not a priority, but then the provost made it a priority. So we introduced voice to it now, and it's widely adopted on campus, and people and students are using it greatly. The other thing is that came out of the Blue Sky task force. I think Katie is here. Where's Katie? Katie was one of the co-chairs of the task force and did an incredible job trying to herd cats about what we want to do in the next 3 to 5 years. But one of the many things that came out is, can we develop a personal assistant for every faculty, every staff, every student? We were going to start with students, that they could actually train it on their own data. And it allows them to navigate the university. We are about 62,000 students, 2,000 acres. It's a big place. Trying to find your way around the campus and who to talk to, when to talk to, for a number of different things is not easy. So building personal assistant for those students that they could use as a co-assistant, if you will, to help them navigate the campus. And if we are able to build the AI platform that I just spoke about before, that will have agents, maybe that assistant could actually call these agents and allow them to answer questions otherwise they can't answer right now easily. So we're building on those. We've built an army of number of different AI technologies for our community. But again, I think the next thing is really about kind of how do you pivot from that individual work to scale? And how do we do it in a relatively quick way?
Excuse me. So, Alina, let me turn to you and ask if you would like to comment on how faculty researchers on campus interface with the environment that the CIO has created. Does that work well? Are there gaps? What do you want to say about that?
Yeah. So as someone that uses Hypergator extensively and faculty researchers across campus, I think it's a wonderful resource, and for a number of reasons. One, Elias talked about, well, we could just use a cloud service versus having something that we control on campus. There is a big difference there, and the big difference there is the people involved. So I'll give an example. I'll pick myself first. I have a team of graduate students carrying out research. Before Hypergator, I would have servers in my computer lab, and every question, the student would come to me. We debug it. Now there's a phenomenal team at Hypergator that can answer these day-to-day questions. How do I run this? How do I access this? How do I move my data from here to there? And these are folks that help people do these sorts of things every day, so it's a lot more efficient than me trying to Google and figure out how to do this. And so there's that phenomenal white glove service that Elias is talking about. And I'll also see in my conversations with faculty carrying out research across campus, there's a lot of different scales of need. Right, you have faculty that are AI experts that are really needing, I want the large scale compute, I want to be able to run a job that's technically challenging to run. And then all the way to folks that are saying, look, I'm going to use regular AI tools, things that are out there that are developed, but I want to apply it to my data or my problem. And that huge scale, that's what having people involved is really useful. So the one side, when someone's developing a new AI method, we're not quite sure how to do it. Now we have a team of people that really know the machine that can help you figure out that this is the best way to implement it. Here's how we can secure resources. Here's how we can really get it at scale. And that's often not expertise every individual faculty researcher has in their group. They may know the algorithms, they may know the foundation, but they don't know the IT. They don't know how to run it, right? All the way to faculty that are saying, I'm using AI that's out there, that's been published onto my work. These are folks that are saying, this is my first time using this. And there's also the help desk and the support and the research software engineers for that. And so the people aspect of HyperGator is really phenomenal.
So what is this nebulous group of people she's talking about who help the faculty?
Yeah, so I can't agree with Alina more. What differentiates what we do is not the box. Anybody with a big check could buy a computer. That's not a challenge unless you don't have a checkbook. But if you find somebody, and university has money, they usually do. It depends on priorities. But really what differentiates what we do at UF is the people. So Eric Dumas, raise your hand, Eric. He's got the Ferrari shirt on right there. Leads a group of staff, about 30 people now. He keeps growing every time I talk to him. He's the most expensive date I have in the shop. But he has PhDs exclusively almost in his shop that work with faculty on a daily basis. They're able to translate need, understand the science, and also understand the capacity and the capability of the technology, and provide the appropriate training so people could be as self-sufficient as they possibly can after those interactions. That investment was made over time. We did not get up one day and say, okay, let's just hire 30 people. In fact, when we started down that journey back in 2012, we had 3 people. And then every time we've made investment to upscale the technology, that's what I said earlier in my opening remark, we also added people. If you don't do that, you'll end up with a lot of flashing lights that people don't know how to use. And I'm not going to name anybody, seriously. There was a university just bought $80 million worth of technology, I believe. 8 months later, they still can't figure out what to do with that machine, right? So it is really, really key to make sure you have the right people that understand the faculty. Often I tell Eric, you go talk to the faculty, they speak your language, because he's a faculty member. And that trust level is incredibly important for people to give up their stack of technologies. When I don't know, 12 years ago, we had 17 data centers at the University of Florida. We have 2 now, and they back up each other. And the reason for that is not because people were trying to be difficult, if you will, but they had no alternatives, right? So we cleaned up the environment, but we also promised them you will have the people to help you with your work. So as a consequence today, all of the university research runs on one machine. All of the university data and hardware sits in 2 data centers by design to back up each other. And they are surrounded by people that Alina talked about that provide that service. That make sense?
So maybe now is the time to pivot and to ask if there are questions out there or topics that you would like us to cover. There's a couple of people back there, I see, have their hands raised.
Jim Wilgenbush, University of Minnesota. First, I want to thank the organizers of this summit. It's wonderful to bring people together on this topic that is evolving so rapidly, and it's really a necessary thing for us to discuss collectively. The question I have really points to maybe something, Alina, that you raised, and that is universities are awesome at generating data. That's what we do. That is our value proposition, I think, to this world of AI. The question I have is that we've been pretty terrible, in my opinion, in terms of recognizing our data as an asset. Most of the conversations that we have, in fact, are about how data are a liability. And there are good reasons for that, right? I mean, protecting private data and so forth is complicated. How, as universities, though, do we sort of move forward into this AI generation and really make our data more valuable and seen as universities as being sort of that source of fuel, if you will, for AI? What are some of the obstacles that we encounter, and maybe what are some of the ways that University of Florida is helping to sort of change this paradigm?
Well, I'll give some of my thoughts and then I'll hand it over. From a faculty researcher perspective, I will say that in some sense, this change in the value of data is happening just based on the AI world we're living in now, right? So I'll say for example, faculty want to share the work that they're doing. They want to put out publications. They want to forward their research agenda. And a lot of our major research venues, our major publications are now saying, we have data papers. We have entire sessions where folks can come together and say, this is the data I've collected, right? And I'll also say there's a lot of research directions in asking the question, what data do I need to collect next? And that's a really hard problem. That was driven in a lot of part in the past, sort of ad hoc. Someone said, oh, I'm interested in this, let me try it out. And now we have a whole AI system that's saying, I can answer questions, but there's areas I'm not strong in, and that can guide where we collect data and the research we carry out. And so in part, some of this value is, at least the faculty researchers and students in data, is just coming about because of how valuable it is in our current state. I think there's also a lot of discussion in terms of how do we host, support, and put that data infrastructure together on one platform to make the most use of it. Elias, I'm looking to you because I'm thinking you have a good vision for this at the University of Florida. And that's probably the next step is we have faculty researchers have individual value in their data, but now when we put it together in a big system, there's sort of this exponential growth in its value.
So that's a great question, and I think Jim, we've been in a lot of circles where we all ended up in the place where we believe that data is going to be the oxygen of AI, and as long as it's the right oxygen, right, that it's not contaminated. And a lot of our universities, organizations in general, they are challenged today of where that data is and what you do about it. So we broke our data in 3 types. We have public data, sensitive data, and restricted data. They don't all be treated the same way. One of the things that we have not done, and I would love to see us do in the next 3 years, is tag the data. Because if you are able to tag it, you're able to decide how you're gonna use it and who should have access to it and for what purpose. If an agent wants to call that data, and if it's tagged the right way, it allows you to do that. So that will be one of our opportunities and challenges moving forward to do that. Just recently, a lot of universities have what they call acceptable use policies for the technology ecosystem. Not very many have acceptable use of data policies. So we built one for UF. I would argue it's not complete, but it's a beginning of maturing that policy as we learn more and more what we can do with our data and who should have access to it. The other thing I would suggest, we tried to do it, and we did a relative success, is put in place a data governance process. It's not perfect, but at least allows you to know who's on first and who's on second. Who gives you the authority to use the data for what purpose? And a lot of people in higher education, they self-appoint themselves as in charge of this data because it was created by them. As opposed to data as a university asset. And how you use it matters. And who has access to it actually literally matters. So we're trying to clean up that ecosystem because if we don't do that, it doesn't matter how good the model is, the outcome is not gonna be as optimal as you would like it to be. I do want to mention one point that I missed that I had talked about earlier, and that is, as you contemplate, and I've seen some of my colleagues do subscriptions for LLMs for their universities. I just want to give you a cautious of not going down the road of buying LLMs by the seat. The entire software industry is moving to consumption. So at the University of Florida, we decided not to buy it by seat. So what we did is we made it available to the campus, and we were watching consumption and make sure that we pivot, we adjust, and we make sure we right-size the need of the university as opposed to buying a seat for 62,000 students. In our case, OpenAI alone would have been $15 million. We didn't go down that road. I know some institutions have done that. I will caution you to really evaluate buying by seat versus paying by consumption. I just wanted to mention that point. I'm sorry? So for us, like last year, between, and we made ChatGPT available, Gemini, Claude, all of them. We made them available in their native environment. Like I said, we have over 70 of those. That's about 35 of them in native environment. The other half, really, actually, they're open source, and they run on Hypergator. In our case, it costs us nothing because we already own the machine. But the University of Florida last year, we paid $187,000 for consumption. I know some of my colleagues paid over $10 million per seat. Just want to make sure you understand that.
So Amanda Pratt, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Virginia Tech, but I'm also a faculty member in the School of Education. So I'm using AI for a 350 archival document project, but I'm also thinking about the strategic plan for the university going forward. So I've done 50 work focus groups across the university with faculty, staff, and students, and we're not doing well in terms of thinking about AI implementation. So I wonder if you can speak about two things. One is just how you navigate the traditional university governance structure, that committee, work groups, things that take time, because the speed of AI is changing so quickly that by the time the report comes out, something has changed. And then I think a little bit more about the cost. I mean, we've had meetings about whether we're spending 20 million or 200 million, while we're also thinking about budget cuts. And so I don't know how we get to the point of being able to put a strategy together that involves actual investment when resources are constrained. So it's about the process, governance, and also the cost. Thank you.
So let me take the, I'll let him deal with the cost because he signs the check. The governance, I think it's very important not to create new governance to the university, since the university already has a lot of governance. So the question is, how do you leverage what you already got? So what we did in our case, we looked at all of our policies and we said, which one of those are not covering the new opportunities and threats that come from AI? So as opposed to having AI policies, we revised and amended our own policies to make sure it covers AI. Because today it's AI, yesterday was the internet, after that was the cloud computing and mobile computing. It's really important not to build an ecosystem around the technology, but to integrate the technology into what you do. I think hopefully if we all do it right, in the next 5 years, it wouldn't matter. It'll be just another tool that we use, and it's part of our ecosystem. As far as the cost, and I'll let the provost touch base on it, there's a number of different costs. The cost of machines and people and soft AI, LLM models, now unfortunately when people talk about AI, they only talk about the subscription cost. And there's a lot more to that if you really want to pivot from individual use to a scale and move the dial.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment or two. I think this is more a question of leadership than cost, because really, if you think of AI as an add-on, then yes, you're going to worry about the cost and whether you can afford another bauble or toy to add on to your infrastructure. But if you believe that AI is as fundamental a piece of the infrastructure as PCs or your enterprise system or a number of other things, then you have to figure out how it gets integrated into the budget of the university. And I think that there are any number of imperatives that force that. The basic one being that if I were a student looking to enter university, one of the first questions I would ask would be, can I learn AI at your university? If the answer is no, I'm going to vote with my feet and go somewhere else. So I don't think AI should be thought of as an add-on to the IT infrastructure. I think it should now be thought of as a basic tool or basic component or a basic piece of infrastructure. You can't afford not to have it, period. Okay? And your president, your provost, your CIO, your CFO, they all need to recognize it and ask, how are we going to enable this? Now, it doesn't have to be enabled at fantastic scale, right? You don't need a huge supercomputer. You may not need all the bells and whistles that we've put in. But you have to figure out what's appropriate for your university, and at the very least, you have to enable your students to learn about it. And that's a question of leadership.
Hi, Dave Stone, Vice President for Research at Oakland University. Question for Alina. I want to go back to the example you gave of your students, but I want you to give me sort of a systems level answer to it. So every science student any of us has goes through a series of stages where by engaging with a methodology, they learn how data is made, they learn how a concept is operationalized. And it's on the basis of that those of us in this generation as experts look at the output of something AI gives us and go, wait a minute, that isn't quite right. If you turn over that moment where they got to do the actual, I want you to take this thing and turn it into data, if you give that to an agent and they never learn it, a generation from now, will they be able to say, oh wait, that isn't quite right, because I remember learning when I did this that it doesn't filter everything the way you want it to, it does it like this. Where will we be on a systems level if we turn all of that early training over to AI?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I will answer it in a couple of ways. First, I think we as a world, I guess, have not encountered this. We've encountered this before, right? My background is computing. My PhD advisor programmed with punch cards, right? And he knew exactly
Me too.
how those are, right? And told me the horror stories. And he thought it was very important I know, oh, it's really bad if you drop the stack of punch cards. That has no value to me, but I said, oh yes, thank you, I'm glad I know this. And then, then we had folks learning machine code, and then we got better and better compilers, better programming languages to different structures. And now we're at a place that people are asking Claude code this up for me, right? And so in some sense, all of us as university educators have had to adapt to, my students are not we're not trained the same way I was trained. In my particular case, being an AI researcher, I had to implement by hand backpropagation. This is the method in which neural nets learn. I mean, it took me months, and then I was able to run it on like a small data set over weeks. And I go, oh, I got one answer. My students can run that experiment in less than an hour, and they can run experiments I could have never imagined over the course of a PhD in a week, right? And so it's always been changing. We've always been training a generation of scientists that have tools and capabilities that we didn't have. So I think we know how to do this, and we know how to do it in our respective fields because we know what the underlying theory or the foundation is that's essential for our students to know, and we got to separate that from the tools and the mechanisms in which they do that, right? And so that they're taking the core classes, they're learning that core method. We have to make sure, when I'm teaching a student, they have to know how to verify the code that comes out of Claude Code. I need to make sure that they can ask the right questions and do a good sanity check of the code. But I don't need to teach them, this is the syntax in Python anymore, right? They have excellent tools that will speed that up for them, right? And so.
I'm going to end it there. We're out of time, unfortunately. You may have lots of questions. All the panelists will be around, so there's also the lunch, so ask questions.